Okay, today's interview is with Mr. Drew Scales. Thank you, Drew, for agreeing to do this.
Thanks for having me.
Drew is the Assistant Athletic Director for Student Athlete Support Services. Drew came to us in November, and when he came in, his feet were running on the ground, and he still is. And so he's the main, and his program is the main behind the scenes program. So, Drew, can you give us background a little bit about your career in athletics? How you started out?
What'd it do?
There's no image. I was wondering.
No, it's recording. It's just behind the scenes, your picture.
Oh,
You want to stop
see
when you
that?
started?
No, let's keep going.
Okay, he can eliminate it now.
Yeah.
So the first question is, can you give us a background of your career in athletics, how you started and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I was a former college student athlete myself, and that's probably my first introduction into college athletics. That experience was one that I really enjoyed, and I think helped to give me some perspective on what student athletes' lives are like and what is needed for today's student athlete population. And I also, while I was an undergrad, was going to pursue sports psychology as a career. And I knew that the mental side of my sport, as well as other sports, is quite significant, often overlooked, and thought that might be an area where I could incorporate some of my schooling into helping athletes. So then when I got into this field, was in my graduate program, a classmate of mine who also was interested in sports psychology was interested in coaching. So we had several classes together and commiserated often about what our career directions were going to be at the time. And he introduced me to someone who is a mentor of mine still today. And at the time, this gentleman was overseeing the life skills program at the school I went to graduate school. And so he got me involved in academic support for student athletes, basically doing some research for life skills programming and what type of best practices and effective programs there were around the country, and sort of the curriculum for life skills that campuses should implement. And that was my introduction into the field. And the assumption was that I did that in the summer. And then the assumption was that in the fall, provided I made an impression on the right people, that I would be able to assume sort of a part-time role in the academic support unit at that place, which was a mentor, working with some of our high-risk football players and some high-profile football players as well. So that was good for me in a sense of being able to get my foot in the door, but then also try to apply some of the sports psychology stuff that I had been going to school for an athlete population. So working with student athletes as a mentor was quite rewarding to me. And then later on down the road, I went back to school again, and one of the individuals that I worked with during my graduate program in academic support for student athletes eventually moved himself up the ladder in our industry, and then he was directing a program at a different institution. And after I finished with another graduate program, I got back in touch with him, and he was able to help facilitate me getting my first full-time job in the business, where I had 5 sports that I was working with and had some other administrative responsibilities. And so from there, I always knew that I wanted to eventually be a director and see how I can affect the masses from a leadership position. And so after spending 5 years as an academic coordinator, then an opportunity found me, more so than I found it, to be able to be a director at a mid-major school. And so spent 7 years in that capacity. I think the staff and I made an impact on the student athletes there in a way by changing culture, just with making sure that students are attending to the essentials of getting a good quality education, and then So I saw this opportunity to become a Seahawk and jumped on it, and the rest is history.
All right. I just want to go off on this just a bit. So we often, and I've worked with you, sir, with you on reviewing candidates for applications for positions, and oftentimes it seems like in your field, in your industry, the student success part, anybody thinks they can be a student success advisor for an athlete. What's special about that? People say, well, I played sports, so I could be an advisor. So
Yeah, there are plenty of campuses around the country that there can be former student athletes that are just happen to be in the right place at the right time if there's an open position, and said student athlete is one that has proven to be fairly responsible and can just fill a position. I, I think, and now I'm a little bit biased with a psychology background, I think that those of us who do have a background in psychology or counseling, and have some awareness of athletics in general are, I think, a good fit for these types of positions, because in my experience, and I'm sure there's plenty that will agree with me, the nuts and bolts of what we do with eligibility and classes and grades and grade point averages is fundamental to what we do, but we oftentimes are fielding questions and concerns from student athletes that are more personal in nature, that require a certain level of adeptness with your interpersonal skills of active listening and empathy, and being establishing rapport with student athletes that allow them to be more comfortable speaking to you about those personal issues that arise throughout the course of their college career. So you're well equipped to handle those scenarios as they come to you, because the reality is student athletes don't really venture too far beyond their circle of the athlete world, and when they gravitate towards you as a person that they can trust, then you better believe you're going to field those type of questions. So I think that is a certain level of qualification that I look for in potential employees here. And now there are other people who come from sports administration backgrounds, and I think they can do just as well. But yeah, just someone rolling out of bed thinking that they're going to field these positions because they like sports is usually not a good sign. Those are typically what we call fans, and we can see them a mile away because they usually have some alternative motives. Just they want to be a part of the program, and they think it's cool to travel, and they were just talking about sports all day, which is not the case.
thank you. That's great information. So how would you describe the duties and responsibilities of this position, and then his position of the people that work with you?
Well, in my role, I'm really in charge of the operations of our unit. So I'm looking at the processes of what we do day to day and how to make those better. So I think a lot of people mistake management positions for managing people, but that's not really a good approach. There's people in position that are going to do a good job, and they can work autonomously without me over their shoulder every day telling them what to do or looking at them. But I'm looking at the programs that we have, creating new programs, refining them to make them better, and along the way throughout the course of an academic year, if there are adjustments that are needed to be made on the fly, then we do those things as well. So I think that's my main charge, in making the overall unit better. So we're currently keeping our fingers crossed about a facility renovation, which will certainly help our operations and allow for a more comfortable environment for student athletes to just be able to come and study, even though they're not mandated to do so. So I think that's an area that is very helpful for them, and something that I'm responsible for doing. Now, the staff, they are very much where the rubber meets the road, and they're working one-on-one with student athletes a lot of times. Some of those who have definitive academic limitations, and so helping them write papers and organizing their notes is something that they do constantly, and following up to make sure that they're getting their assignments done. So in our area, we really don't like surprises, so it's important that the student athletes are have constant communication with our academic coordinators, we call them, to just keep abreast of what's going on with them at any given time of the semester with their academic requirements. So they're really hands-on with our students. They have a good relationship with them, a good professional relationship with our student athletes, and following up with professors, emailing. These various things are what goes on day to day with our staff. I do a lot of scheduling, I know that much, and a lot of emailing, and I speak to professors as well. And there's a lot of things that happen, and this is one of the beauties, I think, of the job is just a lot of variety. Sometimes you may have the best laid plans that you made the day before, but when you come in the door, they get thrown off key because there's just some stuff that comes up that you couldn't have foreseen.
Excellent. I think you've answered my next question, so I'm going to move on. That was, what do you spend most of your time doing? In your position, you said behind the scenes, coordinating, scheduling, arranging. But you did mention something about the staff that work with you. The priority is to work with student athletes in terms of helping them with papers. Work that out for me, because this is a throw off. So the scandals that we know, for example, at Chapel Hill, about the assistance that it appeared student athletes got as opposed to what the typical student gets.
Right.
So clear that up a little bit. Describe that, what that means.
Yeah, so the people who are in our academic coordinator positions obviously got there by being able to have a certain level of conscientiousness about academic work and studying. So each of the individuals that are on our staff have master's degrees, and so yes, we have a learning specialist here who, if there are students who present certain limitations with writing, they are able to assist in a way that's not enabling or doing work for student athletes. So helping student athletes to arrive at structuring a paragraph or a sentence that is coherent in a way that sounds scholarly for an assignment. So it's not writing papers. We certainly stress the physical aspect of full-time staff not in front of their keyboard working on a paper for a student athlete. It's the students in front of the keyboard. It's the student writing, whereby the staff person may be next to them giving a little guidance, but certainly not doing the work for them. So I'm fortunate in that we have learned from the Chapel Hill scenario and are very much a heightened sensitivity to maintaining integrity in every aspect of what we do. So I look at that uniquely for us as being an opportunity within the state to really set ourselves apart from other campuses in our own unique way by doing things that are upholding integrity all the time, but yet still having our student athletes excel academically. So in my time here, I from day one let the staff know in terms of my philosophy on what I want to do and how we're going to do things. Fundamental to all of our programming is going to be an adherence to integrity. So there's not really too much gray area in terms of what's going on there.
Excellent, thank you. So I think you just started to infer this. What's the most positive thing you do in your position? You mentioned graduation, when somebody graduates.
Yeah, the graduation is always a nice little buzzword that gets chills up and down our spines. But I a couple of things. Amidst all the stress that's associated with what we do, there's one thing I like to see. I'm anticipating it right now, is that when students come back from the summer, like you can see some physical growth in them. They look different. There's a certain energy and enthusiasm associated with the start of a semester. I like seeing that, and just being a part of that is fun for me. I also like the varying personalities that you see. So that kind of tests my ability to establish rapport with student athletes, to be able to know what makes them tick and when they're down and when you need to motivate a little bit more. So that's something I really enjoy doing too. There's plenty that come through that door and they poke a little fun with me, and it's all very fine and respectful. And there's others that are very serious and kind of keep me on my toes to help them out in a way to giving them information on helping them to succeed and achieve. And then I think lastly, the biggest reward, which I'm sure there's many others who feel the same way, is just seeing student athletes overcome obstacles. I like the student who is a little rough around the edges, if you will, that at least puts forth some effort and originally might not think that they can do it, but to have them have some progress and to see some success academically is really cool. And you talk about graduation. If you look back at a student like that who maybe was a little limited when they came in or underprepared for college work, but by the time they graduate and they look back and say, "Wow, I've come a long way," those are things that are really, really kind of rewarding for me. I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it.
So, in relationship to students doing well, there are several acronyms in your business. So, just explain a little bit. We hear about this all the time. The APR. What do we mean by APR?
APR is an NCAA academic reform, which stands for Academic Progress Rate. And so it's a measure of essentially graduation that's helping students to get closer to graduation in a timely fashion. So it's broken down into 2 points. So one is eligibility. So if students are meeting their eligibility marks for continuing eligibility to be eligible to compete in their sport, then they get a point. And the other is retention. So if student athletes come back to their institutions, then they also get a point. So and this is for scholarship student athletes. So non-scholarship students are not included in the APR numbers. So through the course of a semester, a student athlete is eligible for 2 points. They are either going to be a 1 for 2, an 0 for 2, or hopefully a 2 for 2. So then those numbers are added up for each roster, okay? And then once you look at that number, they're added up, so it's for the whole year. And so the APR number is a running 4-year total for each program. And so if your APR numbers are good, above a 930, you're okay. If you go below that number, then you run the risk of some sanctions coming from the NCAA that could lead to loss of scholarships. The first one, I think, is going to be a reduction in practice time. And then you also will get public notice that your APR numbers are low. A coach's APR number follows him or her. So if they're at an institution and they have had poor APR numbers, then that will affect them for getting another job. So through the course of the academic year, now you have 4 points between the fall and the spring semester, and you add up the numbers of points that were attained versus the points possible, and divide that number and then multiply by 1,000, and that gets your number. So that's how you arrive at the APR number.
Excellent.
Yes.
Thank you for that explanation. What's the most problematic, difficult thing you do in this position, and or what you've seen here as a barrier perhaps at UNCW?
Well, we have, I alluded to it a little bit, we have a facility right now that is very poor. There's no real other way to describe that. It's very surprising to me that an institution that is seemingly quite innovative and contemporary and really new and young has a facility devoted to student athletes that is not adequate. So that's been problematic, having our programming take place in an area that is just not sufficient. So the challenge of making sure that we have momentum to get this facility better has been somewhat problematic. But I'm pleased. I've cautious optimism that it's going to get renovated at some point in time this summer, so that will make things better. And then I think another bit of culture that exists here is our relationship with faculty. I don't really know what to attribute that to, but it appears as though there are some departments that maybe not embrace the concept of athletics as much as we'd like them to, and I don't know where that stems from. It could be, some of the things we hear in the news about college athletics, and certain people have an opinion, and oftentimes very justifiable opinions about athletics. We're in the middle there. We're in the middle of the faculty side and also the side that is representing athletics. So if there's where we're in the middle there, we have to make sure that we are just trying to convince or give the message to people that we're not cutting corners for student athletes, that we are making sure that they are focused on getting a degree, and that they have to do the work that non-student athletes have to as well. It's just that student athletes represent the institution, oftentimes away from campus, and we don't have an excused absence policy, so that exacerbates, I think, sometimes the conflict between the mission of the athletic department and the mission of the institution. So that's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, but Dr. Elliott is here as well, so he's got a couple questions for you, Mr. Scales.
So, non-student athletes have access to a math center, a writing center, an advisor in University College, an advisor in their major once they declare. How would you respond to some people who might suggest, why can't student athletes just fit into that model? Why do we need a separate advising academic model just for student athletes?
That's because there's a certain awareness and expertise associated with the advisors that work in our office that do what we do. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there's an understanding of an athlete's eligibility, which is quite important for student athletes to maintain and preserve throughout the time that they're in school. That, no disrespect, your average advisor does not have as much an awareness of, and so therefore our staff that's fundamental to what their ability in our area is able to do, is have an understanding of which classes students are enrolling for, that make sure that they are preserving eligibility, because the eligibility is in place to make sure students are moving toward graduation in a linear fashion, whereas a non-student athlete may have the latitude to take a few fluff classes here and there, and there won't be any ramifications, perhaps other than just delaying their graduation date, whereas there will be implications for student athletes if they're just taking random classes. So I think, without saying that our crew is any better than your average advisor, I think that added bonus of information and expertise about eligibility and APR, and just a general sensitivity to a student athlete's life and their world is something that does separate us from other advisors.
Okay. So the students in this class are a very interesting group with coming from different backgrounds, and they're either in the Masters or the EDD program in higher ed. And some of them currently work across campus in different offices, career center, health center, international programs. Dr. Combs mentioned the one current incident of Chapel Hill, but I'm going to go back to the other one, the Penn State incident. And in your role as advisor / counselor, what do you have to do now if someone reports something to you that is an obvious red flag?
Yeah, if there is reason for concern, then it's a duty or responsibility for any university employee to follow through with the Clery Act and go through the proper channels to make that aware of an office of sexual assault or a supervisor to ensure that student's welfare is being attended to. So that is something that was an unfortunate. That's probably not even a good word for it, but a tragic case of just an ignorance to that procedure to go through and follow the steps of the Clery Act to your duty to report those things. And so that's something that we have to do. You're expected to do it, and that's, I think, a general understanding for university employees. And if I can expound upon that, if there's something that that an ugly side to college athletics, that's one example of in a nutshell, a win at all costs type of atmosphere that definitely exists. Hopefully there's not the sexual abuse that's happening at other campuses, but definitely a mentality that, hey, we have an icon of a coach here. Winning is the priority at this institution, and these things that are definitely more severe and more substantial than any win-loss record gets brushed under the rug for the sake of the program's image. So that's one example, a very grave example of the very nasty side of college athletics.
Thank you.
One additional question in terms of your relationship to academics. This office you report to the athletic director as well as the director for the University College here. Explain out a little bit what that line looks like for you and your staff.
We're technically, our office is technically housed in the athletic department, which is different in my career. I have always been a part of an academic support unit that is housed within an arm of the provost office, and I like that better. This is a little bit of an adjustment for me. But so when we primarily are working with athletes, and so the best interest of the department is what we are focused on, and the student athletes at the same time. And then so from the university college side, that the advising arm of the campus is where we are making sure that we are well versed in the core curriculum and students are attending to those pieces, and that we are, I think that this science of advising, I think University College does a really good job of working with students. I sat in last semester on a few of those advising appointments, and I think it's more than just going to your advisor and getting ABC classes. They take measures to actually engage in conversation with the students and finding out where they're maybe struggling in a couple classes and what their intended major is going to be. So I think there's probably other campuses that advisors don't have the relationship with students, but it seems as though University College really takes an effort to connect with students, even though they may see them once, twice a semester. So we are a part of their staff. We go to their weekly meetings and chime in with our input where necessary and hear updates of what's going on in the department, their staff changes. They've got a new director now, and any type of deadlines. They're hitting us up with their emails on changes and new courses that are approved and new requirements, course requirements, prerequisites, and the like. So we're right in the middle there too. But I would have to say that the balance of the scale goes more toward athletics than it does the advising piece.
Okay, good to know. Thank you for that. I have one last question. I ask everybody this. So, and you've kind of addressed this, but so there's a perception that the student athlete is a privileged being on a campus, and they get lots of perks, as opposed to the typical student doesn't get everything the student athlete. Can you comment on that?
Yes. that's a perception that exists nationwide, and in a lot of ways, some of the ugly sides of college athletics help to perpetuate that mentality. So some campuses have separate dining halls for student athletes, and they get a scholarship, and they get, gear and these things that are viewed as somewhat envious for the non-student athlete population. So there is certainly a valid argument for those who have a viewpoint that they have preferential treatment. So in our role and what we do, I think we try our best to dispel that notion by putting things in place from a programmatic standpoint to help dispel that rumor. So one instance is when student athletes travel, that naturally they're going to be out of class because they have a weight competition, but we really enforce that student athletes give a document to their professors the first week of class, letting them know when they're going to be out of town. This is a proactive measure that I think is a step in the right direction, showing a professor that these students are going to be away, but they're still expected to do their work. So it's also an opportunity for a student athlete to engage their professor, shake a hand, make eye contact, say hello, I'm on the soccer team, and then the professor may have some commonalities with that individual. Maybe they have kids that play soccer as well. So I think that's an effort. And then different than, I think, off script of what our job descriptions are, we're certainly encouraging student athletes to humble themselves when they're speaking to professors and write a proper email, not in text message language, to engage your professors more frequently. They're not out to get you, even though they are an authority figure and they deserve respect. Then you can still engage them with questions before or after class to not try to manipulate them into giving the appearance that you are really invested in the class, but do so. Engage them so that you can see that they are a human being just like you are. So that's something that the staff does, that we are encouraging them to make a connection with their professors. So it does exist. I mean, there are people, and I think my role also is to try to soften that blow a little bit on this campus. And I think with just being able to be on various committees and to meet other people on campus, and then they'll just kind of have an informal conversation about what is it that you do and be able to share that with various people helps to have them understand that we're not reinforcing a lazy cut corner type of mentality in student athletes, in as much as we are quite the opposite, in that if students are off track doing something that is not in accordance to what the professors would like to see, then we will take swift and just action, primarily by communicating with their coaches to let them know that their behavior is not exemplary and we want to correct that right away. So the coaches play a huge role in that, and it's reassuring to know that here many of the coaches are ready and willing to enforce that discipline where necessary based on our judgment of whether or not students are doing what they should be doing in the classrooms.
Excellent. Again, Drew, thank you so much for your time. Good information, and we may have some follow-up questions from our students regarding your information.
Awesome. Happy
Thanks,
to help.
Drew.
Yeah.
Thank you.